Welcome to Eye on Korea, a video podcast produced by the Korea Economic Institute of America. Join us for in-depth conversations with experts and policymakers as we explore issues in Korea's economic and political relationship with the United States and how these issues may influence South Korea's regional strategies and its global relationships. I'm Scott Snyder, President and CEO of the Korea Economic Institute, and today I am joined by Steve Brock, former senior advisor to the Secretary of the Navy under the Biden administration. Steve Brock is a retired captain in the U.S. Navy who most recently served in an appointment as a senior advisor to the Secretary of the Navy from April 2022 to January 2025. He served in a variety of capacities within the U.S. Navy, the White House, the Pentagon, the U.S. mission to the United Nations, and the private sector. Welcome to Eye on Korea, Steve.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's great to be here.
And it's wonderful to have an opportunity to talk to you about the prospects for U.S.-South Korea shipbuilding, especially given your most recent role. And I thought that we might start just by talking about where you think things stand in terms of prospects for cooperation, especially based on your engagements with South Korea together with the Secretary of Navy, Carlos Del Toro. I know you visited South Korea with him in February of 2024. And I wonder what you think are the main accomplishments that stemmed from that visit, and where do you think we stand in terms of what has been accomplished so far?
I think there are tremendous opportunities that are emerging right now. We went to Korea for a very specific reason. As many already know, we have to build more ships than we are in the U.S. Navy. We're struggling to build ships on time and on budget and in the numbers that we need. And part of that is due to decades-long atrophy of shipbuilding in America, but also sort of the monopoly-monopsy situation that we're often in most ship classes and the lack of competition. So we went to Korea to, learn how the world's best shipbuilders do it. And how they do it in a very efficient, modern way, a set of capabilities that's driven by their competition with the Chinese, who are taking more and more market share every year. We also went to give them a very simple message: invest in America. Not only invest in America financially, but invest in the American alliance in bringing us sort of the capabilities and capacity and the know-how to bring back some of the workforce, get at the workforce challenges, and get at the modernization requirements for our yards. We often say that we build the world's most advanced naval combatants at shipyards that are often 100 or more than 100 years old in their infrastructure and their technology. And of course, that leads one to the conclusion that those ships are very expensive and not on time. And the third message that we gave, or that we went to Korea to convey, was invest in America with your commercial and your defense shipbuilding capabilities and capacity. We're the only country in the world that only builds naval ships at shipyards. The Koreans build naval ships, some of the world's best, at very large commercial shipyards. And they leverage the power of commercial and defense, in one powerful enterprise. And we do not do that here. So, there is a desire, of course, to be part of the Navy and defense shipbuilding enterprise, but the best way we thought it could be done is through competition and through the commercial private sector, or private sector commercial and defense models the Koreans excel in.
Okay, so there's a lot packed into that first response. Maybe the place to start is with the last point, the naval-commercial shipbuilding divide here in the United States. And do you see that then as something that could be shifted through legal changes, or is that just a condition under which the U.S. shipbuilding sector is going to have to operate?
The ability to build commercial vessels and naval combatants in the United States does not require any major legal changes. It just requires, one, a U.S.-owned subsidiary, and then, of course, some of the other requirements that other foreign shipbuilders have gone through to get, the authorizations to build naval combatants at those shipyards. And so that is why we saw the quickest and actually most strategic in the long-term approach to this problem was getting the Koreans to invest here in the U.S. Not only to be able to build the kind of ships that we can only build in the U.S., but also to offer themselves and us as alliance partners sort of that sanctuary and that strategic depth that one has when all of their capabilities and capacity is not within, weapons range of the Chinese most prolific and plentiful weapon systems. And we also deliver that message to not only on the demand side and the supply side with the shipbuilders, but on the demand side with their major customers, the big European carriers. So, at CMA, CGM, the big French carrier, Maersk, the Danish big global carrier, we met with them and told them of the advantages that they could accrue by partnering with those shipbuilders and having the diversified production facilities in a place that is more secure in time of crisis or conflict, and that would be in the United States.
Okay. It looks like the Trump administration and the U.S. Congress are paying attention to this set of opportunities in ways that could expand U.S.-Korea cooperation. The Trump administration has the White House Shipbuilding Council that they've announced. Maybe let's start there. What do you think the Trump administration should do in terms of being effectively organized to promote shipbuilding cooperation?
When we launched our Maritime Statecraft Initiative, and Secretary Del Toro, realized that solving Navy shipbuilding was a much larger national effort to sort of bring a renaissance in maritime power to the USA. And because of that, we went out to all of the cabinet secretaries that had any equity and others at the White House to make them aware, to bring them on board as a stakeholder in advocating for these changes, and to also, sort of drive action across the federal government. We did that, from the Secretary of the Navy's perch for 3 years, but always knew that it would require White House leadership. Always knew that most of these equities and most of the financial resources lay outside of the Navy to bring back this renaissance in American maritime power. And so the stand-up of the Shipbuilding Office, in my view, is actually an entity that can have a mission focus on leading what we started and the foundations that we laid and setting the stage and teeing things up where it needs to be, and that's at the White House level. It also elevates it to sort of the highest levels of statesmanship. Right. So we have this Trilateral now annual summer event with the President of Korea and the Prime Minister of Japan and the President of the United States. They've set up a secretariat, a year-round secretariat to get things on the agenda and move things forward. And we advocated consistently that shipbuilding should be part of that agenda at the highest levels, because the benefit that we have in having two super strong alliance partners in Northeast Asia they also are the only other real sort of heavyweights in global shipbuilding other than China. And so that's something that office can do. But mostly what it can do is it can do sort of the coordination that we were doing across the federal government at the cabinet level on trying to rally everybody from the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, U.S. Trade Representative, and even the intelligence community behind this need to start focusing on maritime power and bringing it back. We are a naval power only. We are not a comprehensive maritime power. We're facing our first comprehensive maritime power in China since the UK in the 1890s. And there's never been a great naval power in the long term that hasn't also been a shipbuilding and shipping power. And of course, there's never been a great naval power that wasn't also able to build its own naval combatants in a timely and affordable way.
Yeah. Well, since you've mentioned trilateral cooperation, I want to ask you to elaborate on how important is it for this initiative to be trilateral. And you've mentioned the threat. I think that explains part of it. But how do you envision the U.S., Japan, and South Korea working together in the context of that threat to sustain a capable shipbuilding capacity?
I think that there's bilateral cooperation that's already happening, and then there's trilateral possibilities. We did not only go to Korea and meet with the leadership of the biggest shipbuilders there. We also went to Japan and met with the leadership of the biggest Japanese shipbuilders because there's tremendous capacity in both nations. Things have progressed faster with the Koreans, obviously with Hanwha's acquisition of Philly Shipyard. And then Hyundai has entered into several arrangements with American universities to get after some of our big weaknesses in naval architecture, marine engineering, and transference of knowledge and know-how. University of Michigan, MIT, and they're seeking others. So there's real things happening in the U.S. With the major Korean shipbuilders that also build Korean naval combatants. And we're also hopeful that similar things can happen with entities like Japan Marine United, Mitsubishi, et cetera. And that's why I mentioned the Trilateral Summit and the efforts in that regard to try to spread it across the entire three partners. But there's much to learn actually from the Japanese too on the Korean side. We have the ship repair facilities there. We have the forward deployed naval force there. We do quite a bit of ship repair, ship maintenance in Japan. And those are the things also that the Koreans are interested in with MRO, et cetera.
Yeah. Let me continue with the Philly Shipyard acquisition a little bit by Hanwha Ocean. And I think they have made that step to establish a subsidiary. The investment has passed CFIUS review. But I imagine there's also some major obstacles that they're going to have to grapple with just being in the U.S., running a shipyard. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what the challenges might be and how a South Korean company can try to overcome those challenges.
There's with every challenge comes many opportunities. In order for the Philly Shipyard to be what Hanwha wants it to be, and that is a shipyard that builds commercial vessels as it currently does, but also was able to build naval combatants. They need to expand the facility, and they need to grow the workforce. Of course, they're going to bring lots of automation and digitization and other efficiencies that they're renowned for. But because they want to more than quadruple the output of the yard, they're going to need to expand the workforce, and they're working very well with the unions in that regard, and that is good news for South Philadelphia. But they're going to have to expand what's a very constrained, tight footprint. There are other DoD partners adjacent to them, and the Navy is adjacent to them. The Navy has quite a bit of its ghost fleet there in the basin, and has facilities directly adjacent to Hanwha's Philly operation. And so there's opportunities for the Navy to work closely with Hanwha on realizing those expansion needs, and very unique ways of both benefiting tremendously from the synergies that both can bring. Of course, when you're building ships for the Navy, there is a range of options, right? So Philly is really well suited to build large commercial vessels. They could transition to the USNS ships that we need. We need to build ships for Military Sea Lift Command. We need a tremendous increase in our logistics capability in the Military Sea Lift Command, and those ships are a good transition. And then there's naval combatants, the high-end vessels. That require various levels of approvals and clearances and other things that companies, the other foreign companies have gone through, like Austal, the Australian company down in Alabama, and Fincantieri, the Italian company up in Wisconsin. All those things are achievable, and just a matter of going through the proper procedures to getting that done. And then the other thing that both Hanwha and Hyundai are really good at are building submarines, conventionally powered, not nuclear submarines, but conventionally powered submarines. And we, have a need to really ramp up submarine production in this country. We have Austal building submarine components and shifting some of their methods to steel from aluminum and barging those up to Connecticut and Virginia. There's no reason that Korean shipbuilders in Philly or other places that they might acquire in the U.S. could not bring all of that submarine construction know-how to build submarine sections, submarine components, and do the same thing and get those to final assembly at our primes that actually do the work, the final assembly work for the nuclear submarines.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned submarine construction because I was recently at a conference where actually one of the main themes ended up being the possibility of U.S.-Japan ROK cooperation on nuclear submarines. I think they were maybe looking at AUKUS as a model. What is your assessment of the viability of that kind of proposal?
It's interesting because the Australians had a need for nuclear submarines because of their geographic location, because of how far away that they are. Those submarines with that kind of propulsion have tremendous range, tremendous speed, and tremendous endurance. The Koreans and Japanese have no strategic, operational, or tactical need for that kind of range and speed and endurance because they are right in the area of operations that air-independent propulsion, diesel-type technologies are better suited for, right? So there's no submarine quieter than a submarine on the battery, and those kind of submarines are far, far less expensive. So you can get a lot more bang for your buck. If you only need submarines, they're going to operate, on short range and short duration type of missions. And so that's why that's of interest to me that might have been raised because there isn't really a military or a sort of operational strategic reason to have that kind of capability. And if we were going to sort of leverage the tremendous shipbuilding, especially in submarine construction know-how that the Koreans have, it would be far more cost-effective and beneficial to have them work on all the parts that are, not nuke, to integrate into the parts, that are for those countries that need that kind of capability, because there's way, way more bang for the buck in how they've been doing it, for decades now.
Okay, no, that's very useful. I also want to ask you about some of the technology tie-ups between Korean companies and some of the AI companies like Palantir and Anduril. And I'm just wondering how that plays into next generation naval development.
Oh, there's tremendous potential in AI across the spectrum. The first would be on design. We have far fewer naval architects and marine engineers than we had in the past. We are struggling in several ship classes, years and years behind on complex designs. There are those that say that we often don't remember lessons from the past and we make design mistakes that we've made in the past. If your data sets are good, your algorithms are right, you would think that AI would be a tremendous force multiplier on the design side. And also on the lessons learned and sort of, tapping into, all of that past data information. On the maintenance side, And on the operations side, tremendous amounts of possibility with AI. For instance, when an alarm goes off on the ship, does that mean that the ship needs to go into a maintenance availability in the next couple of weeks, or can we wait till the end of deployment 4 months from now? AI would have the potential to take all of this data from various subsystems and systems on the ships, various alarms, various maintenance requirements, and do assessments on what really needs to be done and when in a much, much, much more effective, efficient, and timely way than humans could. The same thing with production. I've talked to you about how modern and efficient and cutting-edge Korean production is compared to our production techniques here in the U.S., which sometimes are a century behind. AI, I think, would help us leap forward in that regard. And I'm not surprised at all that the Koreans, the world's best shipbuilders, are signing these agreements, because they are always staying on the cutting edge of all the things I just talked about: design, production, and maintenance.
Okay. Finally, I just want to circle back and talk about some of the proposed congressional legislation around this sector and the prospects for removing some of the legal obstacles that might expand capacity for foreign companies to come in and be a part, in particular, of the naval shipbuilding component of this. Wonder if I know that this is something that you had been working on in the Biden administration, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you think things stand now and what you think the main benefits for U.S.-South Korea naval cooperation would be resulting from that legislation.
There's, as you know, there's a very large piece of legislation, the SHIPS Act, that originated with Senator Kelly and Representative Mike Waltz. And now we have also Trent Kelly and Rep. Garamendi involved. And there's also Senator Young from Indiana involved on the Republican side and the Senate side. That is a very large piece of legislation that several years of work went into. And it's actually also very fortuitous for shipbuilding and for this cooperation that we set the foundation for and advanced as far as we could, especially with the Koreans, in that Rep. Waltz and his staff that worked very, very hard and very closely with us on the SHIPS Act is now the National Security Advisor, and much of his team that worked on the SHIPS Act is now in the shipbuilding office, at the NSC. So that is a development that raised it up to the White House level. That piece of legislation has all sorts of incentives in it for what we've been talking about. There's a whole section in there about the need to build 250 commercial vessels. That's critical for sea lift, where we're huge shortfalls. There's a trust fund concept in there that would allow the funding of some of these construction differential subsidies to make it as cost-effective to build those kind of vessels in the U.S. as it is to build them in Korea. And there are a whole list of other things within that legislation that leverages some of our ongoing programs that are already incentives. They're just not very, very well known. We ended our subsidies in the 1980s. The rest of the world didn't, and that largely led to the complete demise of the international commercial shipbuilding business in the United States. Some of that stuff is all still in statute, and there's enablers in the SHIPS Act to create the funding stream that would allow those things to be turned back on. There's also some things that are in other pieces of legislation or that passed in the Biden administration that are tremendous opportunities. For instance, the Inflation Reduction Act had over $100 billion in money for clean energy financing and for advanced technology vehicular manufacturing loan program. On the shipyard side, and we've talked to the Japanese and Koreans and others, on the shipyard side, there is about $50 billion that is now, based on Jigar Shah's decisions and Secretary of Energy's decisions, are now available for shipbuilders to get Treasury rate loans up in the billions to either create a greenfield new shipyard or bring a dormant shipyard such as Richmond or Mare Island or Avondale or others back to life, or as Hanwha's doing in Philly, to modernize an underperforming underperforming shipyard. And there's also incentives that are there in the hundreds of billions for ship buyers to finance those ships the same way that are major customers of the Korean shipbuilders. So that legislation and the folks that worked on it are trying to leverage disparate things together to the benefit of shipbuilding. For instance, the Section 301 complaint that the unions put forward on unfair Chinese shipbuilding practices, those remedies are being sort of put in place right now and decided upon. And those remedies hopefully will accrue back to directly incentivizing Korean investment in America to build ships in America as the administration finds a way to actually leverage those remedies for being one of the funding streams for the SHIPS Act.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for today, Steve. I feel like we just got started with this conversation, and so we may want to try to have you back up again, but I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you for joining us on Eye on Korea.
Hi, I'm Arius Dare, the Director of Communications here at KEI. If you want to learn more about South Korean shipbuilding and why it may help redefine U.S.-Korea relations going forward, make sure to check out the Korea Economic Institute's upcoming event on March 26, 2025, titled All Hands on Deck, Korea's Strategic Role in Revitalizing U.S. Shipbuilding. This exclusive event will include in-depth conversations from industry insiders, policy experts, and economic analysts to help you better understand South Korean shipbuilding. Full details and RSVP information are available at www.keia.org/events. That's www.keia.org/events.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss the next one, and leave a review to help others discover the show. Follow the Korea Economic Institute of America on social media or visit keia.org for more resources, events, and expert analysis on Korea. We'll see you next time on Eye on Korea.